Welcome, everyone, to the New Lyre podcast. My name is David Gosselin. I'm the editor of New Lyre, and I'm here with our guest, poet Daniel Leach. Welcome, Daniel Leach.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. This is an ongoing discussion that we are having with poets in discussion, in dialogue, talking about what I think is a very, very crucial issue in our time, which is the question of high art. Is the role of art in shaping our society and shaping how we understand not only the immediate world around us, our interactions with our friends, our neighbors, but also the universe as a whole, right? Our conception of the universe, of the nature of human beings, is really at the heart of what great art is investigating, what great poets and great artists are concerned with. And so we want to talk about, we're not talking about popular culture as such. We're not talking about, we don't want to talk about just those things that are easy to consume on Netflix or Amazon Prime, which we all watch at some time. But the point is to really struggle, right? Like we would struggle with a great piece of art and try to figure out and address some of the great paradoxes that are facing us today in the world. So Daniel Leach, you're a poet. You've been writing for quite a while. And I imagine, just like most poets, you've had to struggle. You've had to make discoveries. You've had to, let go of certain assumptions that you've had. And a lot of the poetic magic really comes out of that process. That's what I've experienced personally. So, yeah, tell us a bit about yourself and your poetic journey.
Well, I have to say that I can remember times, even as a young boy, when I felt things in relation to natural beauty, in relation to beautiful ideas, beautiful emotions, that today I go back to and tap into as very close to what I consider the poetic spirit that animates, I think, all poets. But the poetry bug itself, I don't think I really got until I was in 7th grade in Catholic school, and there was a particular nun who was trying to instill within us a love of reading for its own sake. And she decided to use Edgar Allan Poe to do that. And so we would read Poe stories aloud in class. And I, of course, became completely enthralled with Poe, with language, with the beauty of his language. And of course, with the mystery and the horror and the suspense and all the things we associate with Poe. But it was mostly the beauty of language. I had never really felt that way about it before. So I went to the library. I got out everything that Poe had ever written, read all of his poems, all of his stories, a great deal of his criticism. And from that time on, I fell in love with language, with poetry. Although in high school, I never really had very good instruction in these things. I was unaware of some of the most things I later on became aware were the high points of poetry. I took a bit of a diversion through the woods, as Dante put it, in my early 20s. I dropped out of college. I was I guess you would say I was a full-blown flower child at the time. We're talking 1969, 70, 71, hitchhiked across the country.
Good years, good years.
Yeah. I was at Woodstock, and I became somewhat scatterbrained during the time intellectually. And it wasn't until I, at the age of 23, came across the political movement of of Lyndon LaRouche joined it. I have to admit that politics, political action and such was the furthest thing from my mind. But there was something of Percy Bysshe Shelley's passion for reforming the world that I'd always had. I just didn't know how to go about it. It seemed to me, quite simply, that if mankind had the technology to put a human being on the moon, then why the hell do we have starvation anywhere on this planet? This just didn't make sense to me. And when it was explained to me that this was because there were people who didn't want people to have an advanced civilization and culture and economy, that I said, well, I guess I have to, I have to just bite my lip and get to it and get political, even though that really wasn't something I'd ever considered. And it was within the context of that commitment to changing the world for the better that I became aware of the question of classical culture, because to me, at its core, classical culture is about unlocking. Well, let me say this, that you have to first define what you mean by classical, and you also have to define in culture and what you, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, David, what you consider a human being to be. I mean, this is not something that's a given, because there are people, and this is the prevalent idea in our modern times, really since around the turn of the 19th to the 20th centuries. The prevalent belief is that human beings are no different than animals. Only, a few genetic differences between us and a chimpanzee. You've all heard it, opposable thumb. Well, that one's out. Wheat tools. Well, that doesn't work anymore, because it turns out there's a whole bunch of animals that use tools. So what is it that makes human beings human? And what I learned through my involvement in politics and exploring great art is that it really is that all human beings are born with this innate capability for true creativity, which does not mean like a chimpanzee throwing a turd up against a wall and saying that that's art. There are people who believe that, by the way, but creativity meaning the ability to actually imagine something that has never existed, demonstrate it in some medium, show the process by which it unfolds, have that process be communicated to another human mind, so that they access the same creative qualities themselves, and have it in art, of course. Now, in science, this is the process of hypothesizing a new hypothesis that actually demonstrates itself to be efficient for changing the physical universe. That's how it was true.
Right.
Einstein's theory of relativity. We've now proven everything he said to be true. Some things took 100 years to prove.
Right.
But that's in the scientific realm. In art, I believe what is being done is unlocking this creative core of another human being through the medium of language or music or visual, or the plastic arts. They all really speak to the same thing. The part of the human being that is not tied to the senses or to previous knowledge, in terms of like information, right? It is and it's something that is there in all human beings and is there from before they're even born. It's what religion, I believe, calls the soul. But the problem is that if you talk about it in those terms, you get into the realm of dogma, and
Right.
Art can never be dogmatic. It has to actually allow people to access this, what Poe called the longing for immortality. which is in all human beings, which says something about what a human being actually is. The fact that it is in all human beings tells you something that I think, it's a self-proving hypothesis.
Right.
So, just to wrap up, it was by discovering the work of particularly poets like Percy Bysshe Shelley, John Keats, of course, Shakespeare in a different kind of way, and then through them, going back and looking at Dante, Petrarch, and then also investigating Plato, who Shelley insisted was fundamentally a poet, because he was talking about the same thing I was just referencing. So by immersing myself in the work of these great classical poets, it transformed the way that I wrote, the way that I thought. Suddenly I knew what I was aiming at, and not just writing, sort of scattered feelings, which is what I'd been doing during my hippie days.
Right.
So,
yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing, as they say, because I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. And I mean, the way you describe poetry, the way you describe poetry, your understanding of poetry, I mean, it sounds like poetry. Like it seems to ring true, just hearing what you're saying. And I think that's interesting, because there's something natural about poetry. And yet, when we look at a lot of art today, I feel like some of those almost very simple, there's a simplicity and naturalness to many of the ideas that you developed. But if we look at poetry today, I mean, you just referenced at first the initial thing that moved you was the beauty of the language in Edgar Allan Poe. And I mean, I think people sometimes get sort of, obsessed with that as its own thing. But the point is that there was something was awoken within you, which the language was just a reflection of. And I feel like, I mean, and I think it's important, to discuss, if we look at how poetry is discussed today, right? You said scattered feelings. And I feel that a lot of poetry has just become that. It's become scattered feelings and different ways to sort of express those scattered feelings. And it's like, okay, sure. Yeah, it is. I mean, people are going to hear that, and people are going to have grievances with that. But the question is that the issue isn't that people are just scattering their feelings or that there's a problem with their feelings. But the question is that when we're talking about Poe, or when we're talking about Shelley, or when we're talking about Keats, and specifically these three, if we're talking about English poets in the 1800s, there's an underlying conception of human nature which is common to these poets. And I think if we're to compare the real difference, what's so different about poetry today and art in general compared with the poetry of, let's say, Percy Bysshe Shelley or Edgar Allan Poe or Keats? Is it really just that the language is less beautiful, or it's more, there's more of an emphasis on feeling? And I'd say no, the real difference, though, what we just mentioned, what were just listed are just the facts. The real difference is the conception of human nature, which is prevalent today. And I think it's worth sort of taking a bit of time to, I mean, I guess I'd ask you, how do you see, what do you notice, especially since the time of the 1960s, what kind of shift have you noticed in the general, conception of identity that is found in the average person? And how does this ultimately get reflected in the kind of popular art? And I mean, I wouldn't call it popular poetry, but the poetry that is around these days. What's the difference?
Well, First of all, I would just say, you hit on what I believe is the central difference between great classical poetry and the poetry that has become prevalent in the 20th century, and it's even more so now, which a lot of people mistake, make a mistake in attributing it to the form, rhythm, meter, rhyme,
Mhm.
and these things, and that modern, the prejudice of the modern poets is to throw these out in favor of a more free textual presentation and auditory, vocal presentation, and that somehow represents freedom from this constricting form.
Mhm.
Now, I could say a lot of things about form and why it's actually not constricting at all, but actually allows you to reach a greater kind of freedom. But that's not really the point, because it's not the form that modern poetry, and I say modern really since the late the turn of the 20th century was when we saw the big change. It's not so much the form, it's the actual intent behind it, because I think what poets like Shelley and Keats and Poe assumed about human beings was that all human beings had this innate capability for creativity, that they could reach their soul, if you want to call it that, and evoke within them a feeling for the universal, that they for universal truths that they could then unfold from a theme, connect with this universal idea and the emotion attached to it, and that people would find this liberating, because it pulls one out of the commonplace everyday mode of thinking, which we are required to engage in merely to get by in life. You
Mhm.
have to think logically. You have to think, in sort of logical, deductive ways, and in many cases, ways that are dictated by someone else. Working a job, for example. You're really not. Your mind's not free most of the time. But when you're in the presence of great universal ideas that speak to something eternal, it sort of lifts you completely out of that and gives you and renews the soul in a way that people find all great art does. And that intention, which flowed from, number one, an assumption, I believe, on the part of great classical poets about what they thought human beings were, that we were not just animals that are, slaves to our senses. We're not machines that function like a computer does. That we have something else,
Mhm.
which is capable of experiencing this timeless, eternal quality of beauty. And they had a passionate commitment to accessing that and developing the capability for feeling that within their audience. Right? And I think that passion, which the Greeks called agape, and the Bible calls agape, the greatest, highest kind of love of humanity, is what characterizes spiritually and emotionally the great classical poets. This is entirely lacking in the poets of the 20th century, for the most part. Now, there are some exceptions to that, but the overall concept became simply reflecting the spirit of the times. And the spirit of the times, after World War I in particular, became very pessimistic, very cynical about humanity. We're just these creatures that kill each other. Civilizations going to hell. I mean, if you were just responding to what most of humanity looked like and were behaving like in the early 20th century, you can't blame people for becoming somewhat cynical. But that is the role of great art, is to combat that with this higher conception of what man is capable of. And as Shelley pointed out in his defense of poetry, this is why poets have always been the heralds of a better time throughout history, because they speak to that quality in human beings. He calls them he calls poets the legislators of mankind in that higher sense.
Yeah, in his defense of poetry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the main difference. And then from that came the difference in form. It became fashionable to reject all form in poetry during the 20th century. But that's another issue, because that's what I discovered in my journey, that it was by actually learning the strict rules of formal poetry that and the struggle between the creative idea struggling against the form to come out, to supersede the form and the language itself, and to and if that's successfully done, it really is, the effect of it is much greater than if you just gush out the the raw ideas.
Right, you're getting a bit of all sorts of stuff naturally.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you said something very compelling when you mentioned the whole question of World War I, World War II, and the very sort of pessimistic outlook on the world that sort of took hold, and which a lot of the modernist poets of the early 20th century, they all sort of tapped into that. And I mean, there's all sorts of different arguments made for, the modernists were struggling to, express something, vital or truthful within this just terrible situation. But I mean, when we're talking about high art, I think this question of, especially when humanity is in a crisis, especially when the world is getting uglier, things are getting uglier, everything's getting uglier, that just becomes a greater argument for the need and importance of high art, because high art is not hostage to the specific age in which we find ourselves, right? It's not just a product or a reflection. The poet is not just a mirror of his or her own particular time. Shelley gets at the point that the poet is actually a mirror of eternity. And the challenge, though, is how is the poet going to reflect this question of eternity and the fact that there is this universal quality of creativity roosting within the breast of each individual, even if most are never getting the chance to develop it. All the more, the artist is tasked with sort of demonstrating that regardless of everything around you, regardless of if 99.9% of everybody you meet is acting like a brute, there's something more. And high art, classical art, uniquely has the ability to unfold that and to make people conscious of that, even in the worst situations. And so, I mean, I don't accept the argument of the modernists, of things like The Wasteland and a lot of the pessimistic stuff that was written in the early 20th century, as if it was somehow an excuse, or that the poet was really just doing his job. And since things were so bad, they had to sort of talk about that. That's really not the point. The point is that there's something deeper that transcends whatever place and time and style and opinion that is dominant in society. And I think that's what great poetry, great poets are ultimately tapping into. And that's why they succeed. If they're great poets, that's why we still read them today. They succeeded because they tapped into something that was there all along, regardless of everything else, all the chaos and mayhem that probably distracted most people from recognizing it. So I think we are in a time where we really do need a revival of high art. because I mean, if we're just saying creativity, and you're welcome to say something on this, but people are going to say, what are you talking about? There's no creativity. I watch Amazon Prime, I watch Netflix. There's all sorts of creative stuff, so there's really a question of quality of creativity, the character of that creativity, the intention underlying that creativity, and I feel that's the real subject when we're talking about high art, and we really need it now. I think it's very vital that we get this discussion going, and that we really challenge people on rediscovering what creating high art, what creating timeless art really means. How is it different than popular art? How is it different than the entertainment that we all seek on Amazon Prime and Netflix? And why is it so important?
Yeah, I had the thought just as you were talking there that I believe that what great poetry, as well as great music, the ought to, when one experiences it, one ought to feel as if one is reconnecting with an old friend who reminds them of who they really are.
Mm.
When you read Poe or Shelley or Keats, and I cite them because they're the closest to us, in language. You can read Shakespeare's sonnets. The language, although it's the high point of English language, it's rather distant from our modern English, and sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to access it. And of course, he's a different type of poet. But these poets, particularly Keats and Shelley, you feel as if you're reconnecting with an old friend that you've always known, and that how when you meet, when you reconnect with an old friend or a family member that has known you since you were a child, you feel as if you can't really get anything by them. Everything you've been feeling, recently, or who you think you've become, kind of gets stripped away, and
Right.
who you really are. That's very much, I think, what great art aims at, because it reminds us of our humanity. And as Shelley pointed out, it is the function of great art to develop this quality of imagination, not just fancifulness. See, I think that's what a lot of people mistake for creativity, is fancifulness, is the ability to just create novel things,
Yeah.
novel visual things, and we just the popular entertainment is just full of this, more and more gory, monstrous forms, in movies, more bizarre and fanciful, supernatural experiences and these sort of things. Not that important ideas can't be inculcated in all kinds of interesting and imaginative ways. I don't think all popular culture should be rejected out of hand, because there are some people who are actually trying to be, to access some important ideas to it. But there's a quality to great art that I'm talking about, which brings us back to our common humanity and develops this quality of imagination, which I think Shelley is very puts it very powerfully when he says it is by being able to imagine the experience of another, not oneself, or many others, not oneself, that one develops the capability for the quality of love of humanity that brings about true change for the better in society, which is why great poetry has always been associated with these great moments in history where human beings have accomplished great and good things.
Right.
And that is, I believe, what is so lacking today. And a revival of classical poetry, not just as some people, as I mentioned at the beginning, mistakenly believe simply formal poetry. which they say should be revived because it's been, rejected, and its value is not to be, doubted on the face of it.
Right.
I mean, that's why you preserve old buildings, and that's why you preserve, nature and whatnot, is because things ought to be preserved that are beautiful, in their own right, visually or any other way. But the way that we're speaking about the principle, the underlying principle of classical art, this is the more important reason, because it has to be, we so desperately need to unlock this quality of humanity in people today, because that's what's lacking. We have become a society which believes that human beings are either just animals who are, overrunning the earth and destroying nature, or, in this digital age, the prejudices that, we basically are just super sophisticated machines.
Right. There's a lot.
And this is why I think this revival of classical art in general, but poetry does something very special, which has to do with the fact that we all speak a common language. Therefore, you can access this in every single person, provided they're exposed to it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what you said provoked a lot of different thoughts, but one that I think is, you mentioned the question of love before. Shelley has mentioned this question of love, and I mean, I think it's worth taking a minute here and really counterposing these different qualities and kinds of love that actually exist, and just recognizing that, if we look at the kind of quality, the quality of love that we're number one bombarded with, even when a lot of people think of poetry in a more popular sense, beautiful poetry, it's usually this sort of just romantic, the poet is enthralled with some, beautiful boy or beautiful girl, Sappho, Keats, depends Byron, depends who you're talking about. And I mean, that's one level, but what you're talking about when you're talking about love for humankind, and what Shelley talks about as this conception of love, which is really what has to underlie, what really underlies great, the highest kind of high art, if you will, really the essence of high art. I mean, if we look at popular culture today, or even if we look at philosophy, this question of agape, it's not really there. At best, I mean, in popular culture, sure, you have, I saw Hillbilly Elegy on Amazon Prime. And, there's a lot of these melodramas. Sure, the husband loves the wife loves the husband, the family, father loves his kids, mother loves her children. That's perfect. That's great. That's necessary if society is to function. But when we're talking about agape, I feel it's somewhat of a foreign concept in popular culture, in most people's assumptions about what's happening when a great poet is writing great poetry and what's really driving them. It's not this sort of just even, I don't want to call it melodrama, but this just sort of personal, how should we call it? Just, personal love, or there's a love for the nature of the human race. It's an understanding of what truly defines us as human, and having the ability to not only see that in other people, but to develop it, to cultivate it. And I mean, if we read the works of Shelley, if we read the works of Keats, or even Poe, you see that they're all in some way getting at this qualitatively different idea of love, which is so absent in popular culture. And I mean, you could say it's in religion, but even in religion, I think again, as the quality and nature of art declines, in religion, it often becomes, it also suffers. It becomes stale. It becomes sort of formulaic. It becomes dogmatic. Love thy neighbor, sure. But I mean, as it says in the Bible, and we were talking about this earlier, the power of sin is the law. You can
Mhm.
you can check off all the right boxes. You can have all the right answers, and you can say all the right things. Number one, that doesn't mean you love, and it doesn't mean you're creative. That's not creativity. Creativity is not just about having the right answers, right? There's a much deeper soul searching. There's a much deeper investigation, right? There's more work
Yeah.
involved, and
Well,
it's very much lacking in not only popular culture. I'd say popular religion today. I'd say just in general, and I'd say it's largely because art and culture have suffered and have been dealt such blows, and they haven't yet recovered. Though, but I'm an optimist.
well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that it is the passion to develop it within other human beings. It's not enough to just say that you believe in it. Lots of people believe that human beings are special, that they're made in the image of God, and all that. But this passion to uh, enable others to discover their humanity and to have a way to express it and to participate in things with other human beings, which celebrate and develop this capacity within people. This is what I think is the mission of great art. Let me just relay an experience I had, which I think was uh, perfectly expressed the unity of of a positive conception of what of faith, religion, call it what the belief in
A higher
in
power, a
the
loving
in
higher
the
power.
higher power and the supreme being and this quality we're talking about. I went to a concert 10 years, or let's see, it would be 9 years ago in 2011 at Rice University here in Houston. It was a special concert on the anniversary of 9/11, and it was a performance of Mozart's Requiem. Now, for those who don't know Mozart's Requiem, this is one of the most beautiful works in the classical repertoire. Mozart wrote it. In fact, he died before it was even finished. People have probably seen the movie Amadeus. It gives a Bowdlerized kind of uh, uh, account of this. But this was Mozart's attempt to actually communicate this special quality of uh, of agapic universal love of mankind, and that when we do that, we are in touch with the Creator. And at this performance, which of course was highly emotionally charged because it was the 10th anniversary of this horrible, tragic event. Um, it was a chorus composed of three different area choruses that all came together to sing who had never sung before. It was I believe it was a Rice University orchestra, and they had the soprano section of the chorus is an interesting hall in that it had a first floor, which the orchestra and half the chorus or three quarters of it was in the front of it. And then it had this balcony that goes all around in an oval shape around the about 2 floors up in this hall, and which partially was with audience members seated, but near the front, up there, basically about 30 feet in the air, were the sopranos. And there's a part of that of the piece where the sopranos are singing this ethereal, heavenly a beautiful sound, which is being answered, by the bass instruments in the orchestra, which is supposed to, represent this. It's almost like a calling from beyond, out of it's almost like a calling of the grosser material of the universe to something beyond.
Yeah, there's
it has
that dialogue.
Yeah, it is. And only in this case, it was heightened by the fact that the sopranos were physically above you. So you can imagine the impact that this had, and the combination of the emotional significance of the event, which everybody was unified in understanding why they were there. So that made it different to begin with. Everybody was there for a common purpose, to commemorate this event, which we all experienced together, right? As human beings. The way in which the chorus and orchestra came together with a real mission to make the ideas contained within Mozart's work real and implanted in the hearts and souls of the audience was palpably greater than I've ever experienced in any other concert. You could feel the intention of the composer through the conductor and the performers. All of this, and the fact that everybody in the audience was very visibly moved in a way that I have not seen before. And all this came together in such a way that you had a profound knowledge, really. I don't want to say feeling, because it has the quality of certainty to it, that you were in the presence of something eternal and divine, mediated through the soul of Mozart, who may be physically dead, but was alive in that room at that moment.
Right. And I mean, I think that's what you're saying is great, and it's really important, because I mean, I can hear people. This question of, you talked about a certainty, right? There's a sort of intimation of something greater than ourselves, and I mean, people get so caught up, worked up and bothered over this question of, people are going to call it, going to throw around the word God, creator. And I mean, there are a lot of formalized and established religions, and from across the world, right? That have all sorts of different.
And I've tried most of them.
And you've tried most of them. That's great. And but it's not where I think people have trouble making the distinction between some organized set of beliefs, a dogma, organized religion, which isn't necessarily bad. But my point is, there's a difference between spirituality, right? There's a spiritual dimension to human nature, which is not directly perceivable. And I mean, I've been throwing around this formulation a lot, but I think it's important. There's a spiritual dimension to the human species, and there's a material dimension. The spiritual dimension is not directly perceivable, right? And so often, especially today in the way education is organized, and because of a lack of great art like Mozart, which just makes this question of something greater kind of undeniable. Most people are not exposed to it as they should be. People struggle with this question that just because something doesn't have directly perceivable characteristics, it doesn't mean it doesn't have indirectly perceivable characteristics. And just because it has indirectly perceivable characteristics, it doesn't mean that these characteristics don't have just as objectively definable dimensions or realities that can be discussed. But the question is how to discuss them, right? What are the conditions by which we can approach these questions? And that's not obvious. That's what's so elusive, because we are really sort of, especially in our age, and especially since the Enlightenment, rooted in a sort of empiricist approach to reality. So if you can't touch, taste, hear, or smell it, it's sort of like, well, that's less real, that's less concrete. And I mean, people take this to all sorts of extremes. The concrete poets took that to one extreme, the abstract artists took it to another extreme. But the point is that the quality and intent of something like Mozart's Requiem, that's real. And it's actually speaking to something real within human beings. People may not like that. They may not like that they're able to be, gripped in that way, because it sort of defies how we've been conditioned to sort of formulate our thoughts and our feelings, and how we've been taught to use language. What we've been taught is objective when it comes to quote unquote scientific method. So I mean, Mozart is, I can't really think of something, more important in terms of thinking about what a real intervention into a culture looks like. Take Mozart. How are you going to put that into words, right? Look at the quality of emotion in something like the Requiem, which, if anybody who is listening to this hasn't listened to the Requiem, definitely take the time and go listen to it. And then, I mean, it's a fun sort of idea, a fun sort of challenge to imagine how could I put that into words? It seems beyond all words, yet it's right before us. It's right there. We're experiencing it. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that tension, that's what we're talking about by high art. How are you going to get from here to there in actually capturing that and communicating that? That's like it. That seems like an infinite gulf, and it is. But the question is, how are we going to cross it? It's because we're going to find out that there's actually another aspect to our being, which is actually not bound by the same material conditions as the material world. And it's when we're able to investigate that, and that's what poetry is really about, is resolving this gulf between the finite and the infinite, which, I mean, oftentimes, I mean, you can read Edgar Allan Poe. He talks about this in his essays. You can read Shelley, his famous Mont Blanc. They're really addressing, or Schiller, they're addressing this question of the infinite, right? And how do you wrestle with the concept of the infinite? And I mean, this is what Plato.
Well, as Poe.
Pardon me?
As Poe pointed out, it can only be done for brief moments because of the very nature, of the human psyche and the fact that we live within a body.
Interesting.
And do have senses and do have a mortal being.
We do have.
We can. Yeah, we can see, but brief glimpses of the infinite. But we have a thirst for it that's really within every human being. I believe it's the essence of why people become religious. They may not have it satisfied in the way that great art does, but that's what they're seeking. And it's very interesting to think of the implications of what we're talking about here, because if it is true that the capability for that experience is within every human being, as I was demonstrated to me by that and other experiences, and what we were experiencing was something which was a not just the product of it was mediated through writing down notes, and people learning instruments and playing instruments and people learning how to sing and all the things that had to happen to make that happen, the chain of events that went into it, which stretches around the world. But the essence of it was this individual human soul mediating something divine, and in that moment he was alive in a greater sense than most people are alive when they're actually walking around. Mm-hmm. Because the most important thing about a human being was there with us in that room. In a sense, it didn't die. Now, the very fact that something like that can happen implies something very profound about the universe we live in. I mean, you can call it whatever you want, but the very fact that something like that can happen, and that it's not just imaginary, because when this happens in science or in great art, it changes people in ways that make them more capable of changing the physical world around us. When a scientist makes a great discovery because of a tapping into this creative quality, he if it's actually a true discovery, as in the case with a Kepler or a Einstein, it changes the world. It changes all of human history. It changes the physical world around us. Ultimately, it could stretch out to the rest of the universe. So it's not imaginary. It's real, and the very fact that something like that can happen means that there has to be a quality embedded in the universe itself, such that something like that can happen. Nothing can happen without the possibility of it pre-existing the actual thing happening. The fact that human beings emerged on this planet out of the biosphere, through the process of evolution, means that the capability for this unique human thing, what we call creativity, had to exist as a pre-existing condition in the universe. It's part of the laws of the universe. Now that's an interesting thing to think about, and I think is a interesting philosophical starting point to consider. This is the real difference between the modern age we live in right now and what great classical artists and thinkers, the way they thought. It was this assumption about human assumptions about the nature of the universe. And people try to pass it off as being a religious prejudice, but I think it can be proven by the very fact that human beings are capable of this.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, that's a very powerful point, and I feel like it's worth meditating on, and it's worth meditating on because I mean, there's so much to appreciate there in terms of, oh, wow, so this is really the challenge of poetry. I mean, this is really the challenge of high art. That's a tall order. And I think that's the reality. It is a tall order. The universe is more complex than it appears. And I mean, a lot of people talk about, they throw a lot of words around, right? All sorts of people throw all sorts of words around: truth, feelings, love. And I think the way that you just described the phenomena of creativity and the fact that it exists, whether people like it or not, whether they are able to find some mode or form of expressing it, I mean, that's all the more to appreciate the challenge and the infinite nature of what we're dealing with, and what the poet is really tasked with tapping into. And we can, if with that in mind, I mean, we can call that love. We can call that agape, that there actually is this animating force that drives people. And it's Shelley talks about in his defense of poetry at the end as that which moves, which is not moved, but moves. And I mean, that's what I think all great artists need to and have tapped into. And it's maybe become difficult to talk about and address, especially if we're trying to reduce it to some sort of, a set of deductive terms or definitions or categories. But I mean, if we listen to Mozart, it's there. If we read the greatest poetry, whether it's that of Keats, Shelley, Shakespeare, Dante, it's there. Whether we look at the paintings of Da Vinci or the sculptures of Phidias, it's there. And I think it's worth just appreciating the fact that we need to wrestle with that, and that the whole human species should be wrestling with that. And to the degree more and more people are exposed to that, you mentioned, right, you mentioned that thing about a friend. It's like great poetry, reading great poetry is almost like, meeting an old friend. And what came to mind was Keats actually says something just like that. He has a famous quote that poetry should be a friend to man. That poetry should be a friend to lift the cares and to lift the thoughts and soothe the cares of man, of human beings. A friend in that sense.
Yeah.
And the more and more that people are given a chance to befriend this quality of art, this quality of thought, this creative character, I mean, I think the more people are going to be free to not only investigate themselves, but to investigate the universe generally, and to appreciate it in all sorts of ways that were just denied in popular culture, that were denied in popular or formal education, that were denied in even a lot of scientific training today, that were denied in a lot of popular art and modern poetry today. Of course, there's always exceptions, but we're not talking about the exceptions. We're talking about the fundamental issue, which persists across all these different spheres of activity and expression. So yeah, I think this question of love, agape, as you've described it, it's worth wrestling with, and it's worth, after this discussion, sort of taking the time to, read Keats's great odes, read Shelley's odes, read Dante's Commedia, and a lot of other timeless works, and really take it from that standpoint of what were these people really wrestling with? What did they have to wrestle with in order to get where they are? And how do we all get there, such that who knows what we'll find once we get there? But I mean, I think this is really the challenge right now. And given with everything happening in the world, and that there are all these crises, that all the more, that's an argument for right now taking the time to really rediscover these higher principles.
True. Maybe we should close with this little passage from Shelley's Defense of Poetry towards the end.
That sounds like a good idea.
He says, he's talking about periods of great change in human society. He says, at such periods, there is an accumulation of the power of communicating and receiving intense and impassioned conceptions respecting man and nature. The persons in whom this power resides may often, as far as regards many portions of their nature, have little apparent correspondence with that spirit of good of which they are the ministers. But even while they deny and abjure, they are yet compelled to serve the power which is seated upon the throne of their own soul. So that's, belief in that is fundamental, I believe, to great poetry. That's
perfect. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end. I mean, yeah, what you said, that's poetry right there. And so I thank you, Daniel, for joining us, for having this discussion. And I would mention to everybody that Daniel's book of poems, Voices on the Wind, is actually available on Amazon. So anybody can, after this discussion, if they want to read more, they can find many of your poems on the Chained Muse website. And if they really want to get a sense of your greater body of work, your book Voices on the Wind is available on Amazon. So thank you, Daniel, for joining us. Thank you
for having me. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll be back next week. Thank you, Daniel. Take care.
Bye.